All right, so get ready, because today we're going deep on something that just might flip your whole idea of success on its head.
Oh.
Yeah, we're tackling ego
Huh. Oh,
and how this thing that we don't really talk about that much could actually be the biggest thing that's holding you back from what you want to achieve.
interesting.
So to help us unpack all this, we're going to be looking at Ryan Holiday's book, Ego is the Enemy.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it was a bit of a punch in the gut for me, honestly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it really made me think twice about some of the things I just assumed were true about what it takes to, to make it, to be successful.
Yeah, I could see that.
So what do you think? Is it more about like being confident or more about knowing when that confidence is actually working against you?
That's exactly what Holiday is getting at.
Hmm.
He says that this inflated sense of self, this ego, can trip us up at every point in the journey.
To every point.
Yeah, when we're just starting out, when we get a taste of success, and even when we fail.
Huh. Okay, so let's break that down. Let's start with that early stage when you're hungry, you're driven, but maybe that's when ego can really mess things up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so imagine this. You're this young, ambitious Civil War general.
Okay.
You're William Tecumseh Sherman, actually.
Wow. Big shoes to fill.
Yeah, the guy who later becomes famous for saying, war is hell.
Right.
So you're offered a promotion early on in your career. What do?
I mean, most of us would jump at the chance, right?
Right. More responsibility, more prestige.
Exactly.
But Sherman, he actually turned it down.
You what?
Yeah, refused the promotion.
That doesn't seem like something an ambitious person would do.
I know, right? It seems counterintuitive. Like, shouldn't you grab every opportunity that comes your way?
Yeah, that's what we're always told.
But Sherman understood something really important.
What's that?
He knew that true confidence comes from being good at what you do, not from chasing titles or outward appearances. He knew he wasn't actually ready for that level of command.
So he was more focused on actually mastering his craft than on how it looked to other people.
Exactly.
That's pretty insightful.
And it really makes you think, how often do we get caught up in trying to look successful
Right.
instead of just focusing on, doing the work?
Yeah, I know. I've definitely been there.
Me too.
It's so easy to get lost in the hustle.
And forget about the substance.
For sure.
But Sherman's example, I think it really changes how we think about ambition.
It does. It really does.
Okay, but now think about today with social media and everything.
Oh, yeah.
It's like there's this constant pressure to build a brand, to talk yourself up.
Even before you've really done anything.
Right.
It's
It's
crazy.
like everyone's screaming, trying to be the loudest voice in the room.
Holiday uses this writer, Emily Gold, as an example.
Oh, what happened?
Well, she got this incredible book deal.
Wow, that's amazing.
You'd think she'd just pour all her energy into writing, right?
Yeah, of course.
But instead, she got sucked into this social media black hole, constantly looking for validation, trying to craft the perfect online persona, and her book suffered because of it.
It's like she was so worried about proving she was a writer that she forgot to actually write.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It makes me wonder, is that pressure to project an image something we're all susceptible to?
I think so. It's easy to get caught up in needing that external validation.
Yeah, I can see that.
But like we saw with Sherman, the real test is in the doing. It's about putting your head down, focusing on the work, and letting the results speak for themselves.
That's a good point.
I think this also makes us rethink the whole follow your passion thing.
Oh, yeah, that's everywhere these days.
Right, but Holiday throws a bit of cold water on that idea.
Really, how so?
Well, he uses this Roman poet, Martial, as an example.
Okay, a poet. So you'd think it'd be all about passion.
Right, exactly. But Martial actually hated having to work for these rich patrons.
Oh, so he didn't have that artistic freedom.
Not really. He craved this life of luxury and freedom, and it really affected his writing.
That bitterness kind of seeped into his work.
Exactly. He was so focused on what he didn't have.
So it's not just about having passion. It's about directing that passion the right way.
Yeah, Holiday compares this to Bill Belichick, the coach of the Patriots.
Okay, that's an interesting comparison.
Right. Early in his career, Belichick was known for doing all the stuff other coaches hated,
Like what?
like watching game film for hours and hours.
So he wasn't looking for the spotlight. He was just obsessed with the game itself.
Yeah, and that dedication obviously paid off.
It definitely did.
And this is a good question for all of us. Are we really dedicated to the work, even the parts that aren't glamorous?
Right, because passion can fade, but that commitment to the process, that's what matters in the long run.
That's what keeps you going when things get tough.
Okay, this is making me think about those times when I get super excited about a new project, but then struggle to stay motivated when the initial excitement wears off.
Yeah, we've all been there.
It's easy to love the idea of something, but the real test is showing up and doing the work day after day.
And that's where ego can show up in a whole new way,
Oh, how so?
especially when we start to see some success.
Right, because once you've achieved something, it's easy to think you've got it all figured out.
And that's the danger of early pride. Holiday uses Jackie Robinson to illustrate this.
Jackie Robinson, the first black player in Major League Baseball.
Exactly. He had this incredible restraint, this composure, even with all the pressure and racism he faced.
Yeah, I can't imagine what he went through.
Robinson understood that his purpose was bigger than him.
Mm.
Breaking down those racial barriers in baseball meant he had to endure, to rise above all the hatred.
He had focused on the big picture.
Exactly.
So he channeled his energy into something meaningful, something that transcended his own experience.
And this is where we see a very different example. General George B. McClellan during the Civil War.
Okay, what happened there?
McClellan was this brilliant strategist, on paper at least,
Okay.
but his ego was his downfall.
How so?
He was so afraid of failing, so obsessed with being perfect.
That it paralyzed him.
Yeah, he couldn't make decisions, wouldn't take risks, and the Union Army suffered because of it.
Wow, so his fear of looking bad actually led to worse outcomes.
Exactly.
I wonder if we all struggle with that sometimes,
I think so.
even in less dramatic situations.
Absolutely. Think about it. Have you ever been so scared to fail that you held yourself back from doing something?
Oh, good point.
That's ego at work, and it can be so sneaky.
It's like that fear of failure becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. The more you try to avoid looking bad, the more likely you are to actually mess things up.
It's like we need to be able to recognize that.
To see ego for what it is, an obstacle that keeps us from reaching our potential.
That's powerful.
So how do we deal with the ups and downs of life without letting ego take over?
Yeah, that's a million-dollar question.
That's what we'll look at next time, how to stay grounded in the face of both success and failure.
And how to cultivate that mindset that lets us keep growing even when things get tough.
That's the goal.
Sounds good to me. See you in part 2. Okay, so last time we were talking about how being afraid to fail, that need to always look good, can actually hold us back.
Right. Kind of ironic, isn't it?
Totally. And that leads perfectly into what happens when we actually do find success. Holiday says that's when ego can become even more dangerous.
Oh, why is that?
Because now it's got all this fuel.
I see.
So you finally made it to the top. You're there. Everyone's cheering.
Okay.
But what could possibly go wrong?
Well, that's when you might start to believe all the hype, to think you've somehow moved past the need to grow and stay humble.
Right.
Holiday uses this story of Katharine Graham to show how this can happen.
Katharine Graham, the publisher of the Washington Post.
Yeah, she took over after her husband died.
Wow, what a tough situation.
I know, taking charge of a major newspaper, dealing with a family tragedy.
It's hard to even imagine the pressure.
And it gets even worse. She had to deal with a union strike, money problems, even a potential hostile takeover.
It would have been so easy to just fall apart.
Absolutely, but Graham showed this incredible resilience.
So she had to push aside her own ego.
Yeah, her own fears and insecurities to really focus on what mattered.
It's like she didn't even have time to second-guess herself or get caught up in all the drama.
The stakes were just too high.
I think that's a really important lesson for all of us.
It is.
Like when you're facing something difficult, a personal crisis or a setback at work, what are those things that keep you grounded?
Yeah, those core values that help you navigate the storm.
I think it's so easy to lose sight of that when you're in the middle of it all.
Absolutely, but having that sense of purpose, that compass, can make all the difference.
It really can. And this brings us to another example, Genghis Khan.
Wait, Genghis Khan, the conqueror.
Yeah, Holiday highlights something surprising about his leadership.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is it?
Well, Genghis Khan was this voracious learner.
So it wasn't just about brute force.
No, he was constantly learning new things, adapting his strategies based on what he saw from other cultures.
So he was always open to new information.
Exactly. He understood that there was always more to learn, even when he was already so successful.
It's a good reminder for all of us to stay curious.
Yeah, and it really contrasts with what Holiday calls disruption.
Oh, I see.
Those big companies, they have all the resources, but they fail to adapt and end up getting overtaken by these smaller, more agile competitors.
Because they get complacent.
Yeah, they get stuck in their ways. Their ego blinds them to the need for change.
So it doesn't matter how much you've already achieved. You have to keep learning.
That's the student mindset.
Exactly. That willingness to learn, to grow, to admit when you don't know everything.
That's what keeps you moving forward. Okay, but how do we actually cultivate that mindset? Especially when we're busy or feeling burnt out.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think one thing is to look for mentors or colleagues who challenge you, who see things differently than you do.
Yeah, to actively seek out those opportunities for growth.
Exactly. And this brings us to another important part of keeping ego in check.
What's that?
Organization. Holiday uses President Eisenhower as an example.
Oh, yeah. Wasn't there something about sealed envelopes?
Never bring me a sealed envelope. That's what I have a staff for.
Right.
Eisenhower knew how to build systems, delegate, trust other people to do their jobs.
He didn't have to be involved in every little thing.
Nope. He didn't need that ego boost.
It makes you think about those leaders who have to control everything.
Right. It just creates chaos.
And Holiday contrasts this with what happened to John DeLorean's car company.
DeLorean, he was brilliant, but his ego and his lack of organization were his downfall.
So he couldn't see what was happening.
He was too caught up in his own vision, too resistant to feedback, and the company imploded.
It's a good reminder that you can't do everything yourself.
No matter how talented you are.
And sometimes the best thing you could do is step back.
And let others take charge.
It takes humility to build something truly successful and sustainable.
It does. It's about knowing your limits and empowering others.
These are some tough questions to ask ourselves.
They are.
But building those systems, trusting other people, that's how you make a real impact.
And achieve lasting success.
That leads us to something that may seem a bit counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Enduring.
Enduring.
Yeah, it's about letting go of outcomes, accepting things as they are.
Finding peace in the chaos.
It reminds me of the Stoic idea of amor fati, a love of fate.
It's very similar. Holiday uses General George C. Marshall as an example.
Marshall, he was involved in so much. World War II, the Marshall Plan, the Cold War.
He was known for his humility, putting the greater good first.
He was able to handle all those challenges with such grace.
It's remarkable.
How did he do it?
Marshall's approach is a model for real leadership.
Hmm.
He understood that it wasn't about him, it wasn't about getting recognition.
It was about serving something bigger.
Exactly, a sense of duty, a commitment to a cause that goes beyond your own ego.
It's about the mission, not about you.
And that takes a lot of inner strength and self-awareness.
It makes me think about those people who are driven by a real sense of purpose.
Right, they seem to have this inner peace.
Like their fulfillment comes from something deeper than just external validation.
And that brings us to one of the most destructive things about ego.
What's that?
It lashes out when it feels threatened. Remember Orson Welles and Citizen Kane?
Oh yeah, wasn't that when William Randolph Hearst tried to destroy the film?
He thought it was based on his life.
Wow.
Hearst was so powerful, so used to getting his way.
He couldn't handle it.
Nope. And his campaign backfired big time.
He actually made the film even more famous.
Exactly. Cemented his own legacy as this insecure, controlling figure.
It's like he was so focused on protecting his image
that he ended up hurting it even more.
So how many of us are wasting time and energy fighting battles that are just fueled by ego?
It's a good question. What could we achieve if we channeled that energy differently?
That leads us to another crucial part of all this.
Okay, what is it?
How we handle setbacks, failures.
Those are inevitable.
Exactly. The question is, how do we keep from getting swallowed up by negativity when things don't go our way?
Holiday has this great example. Malcolm X in prison.
Okay.
Instead of giving in to despair, he used that time to educate himself.
Wow.
He read constantly and came out as a much stronger, more knowledgeable leader.
So he turned a terrible situation into an opportunity for growth.
Exactly, and that's something we can all learn from.
That's powerful.
When you face a setback, how do you react? Do you blame others or look for the lessons?
It's about perspective, right?
It is. Reframing challenges as opportunities to learn and improve.
Okay, so this brings us to one of the main takeaways from all of this.
Okay, what's that?
Taming your ego is a constant process.
Not a one-time fix.
Nope, it's a journey of self-awareness and self-regulation.
Like a muscle you have to keep working out.
Exactly. The more you practice, the stronger you become.
Holiday emphasizes this with the story of Tom Brady.
Tom Brady, the quarterback.
Yeah, he was drafted super late but became one of the most successful quarterbacks ever.
He's known for his work ethic, his dedication.
Even after winning all those Super Bowls,
He never started pushing himself.
this is the Japanese idea of Kaizen, continuous improvement.
It's about never settling, never letting success go to your head.
And always striving to be better.
Okay, So we're back for the last part of our deep dive into taming the ego.
We've talked about a lot.
We have from early pride to that student mindset.
Right.
But now the question is, how do we actually use all this?
Yeah, how do we put it into practice?
Because it's one thing to understand it.
But actually changing how we act, that's the hard part.
Exactly. We all have those moments where ego just takes over
It's like a constant battle.
between our best selves and those impulses that lead us astray.
That's why being self-aware is so important.
Yeah.
The first step is recognizing when ego is showing up.
So, like, what are the signs?
Those patterns of thought, those reactions that tell us ego is in control.
This makes me think about those times I get defensive when someone gives me feedback, or when I just have to be right, even when it doesn't matter.
That little voice that says, look at me, I'm important.
It's so sneaky.
It is, but once you start to see those patterns, you can interrupt them.
How do you do that?
Create space between the thing that happens and your reaction. Instead of just reacting, pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, is this ego talking, or is this really me?
That pause is so powerful.
It's like hitting reset.
Yeah, it gives you a chance to choose a different path.
Another thing that helps is gratitude.
Oh, I love that.
When you focus on what you're grateful for, it takes the focus off you and your ego.
You start to appreciate things more.
And you feel more humble.
And this brings us back to purpose.
Right.
When you're connected to something bigger, your work has more meaning.
It's not about getting validation anymore.
It's about contributing something valuable.
Exactly.
And that doesn't have to be some huge thing.
Right. It could be showing up for your family, being a good friend, making a difference in your community,
It's about finding those things that light you up.
and putting your energy into them.
Okay, this brings us to something that I think is really tough.
What's that?
Forgiveness.
Yeah.
Forgiving yourself for your mistakes. For when you let ego get the best of you.
That's so important for growth.
But it's hard, isn't it?
It is. It's easier to beat ourselves up over past mistakes.
Than to show ourselves the same kindness we show others.
But when you hold on to that guilt, you're just giving ego more power.
It keeps you stuck.
So how do we break free?
That's the question.
It starts with accepting that you're not perfect.
Everyone makes mistakes.
It's part of learning.
And then you have to make a choice to move on.
To learn from it and do better next time.
It's like giving yourself permission to be imperfect.
To not have all the answers.
That's a good way to put it.
And this brings us back to Kaizen, continuous improvement.
Right.
Taming the ego isn't about being perfect.
It's about always trying to be a little better each day.
It's a journey, not a destination.
And that journey can be amazing.
As you let go of ego, you open yourself up to so much more.
Deeper connections, more creativity, a sense of peace that you can't find anywhere else.
So true.
Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one last piece of advice you'd give to someone who's trying to tame their ego?
Remember, it's a practice.
Not about being perfect.
There will be times when ego wins, when you make mistakes.
We're all human.
Exactly. The key is to keep coming back to these principles. Self-awareness, gratitude, purpose, forgiveness, continuous improvement.
And don't forget to be kind to yourself,
That's so important.
because it's not about getting rid of ego completely.
It's about finding a balance.
I'm leaving this conversation feeling really hopeful.
Me too.
Like we've been given a map, some tools to navigate life with more intention.
It's up to you to create your own journey.
How will you choose to tame your ego and live a life of meaning and purpose?
That's the question we all have to answer.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration. Until next time, keep diving deep.